We are now only a few days away from the start of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix weekend, which means that it is time for the Saudi Arabian preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix, and also the series where I love to interact with you, the viewers, so down below in the comments let me know what are your predictions for the upcoming race. You can find mine out at the end of the video. If you do enjoy the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. A majority of my viewers are not currently subscribed to the channel, and if you're one of those, I would greatly appreciate it if you just tap that little sub button. Now, let's get to the video. Before we start previewing Saudi, let's take a quick look back at the Bahrain Grand Prix and see what we learned from that race. The first thing we learned, and we may as well get it out of the way, is that the Red Bull is an absolute rocket ship at the moment. Max Verstappen absolutely dominated the Bahrain Grand Prix. He had better tyre wear than his rivals and was still somehow lapping at times 0.8 seconds per lap faster than main rival Charles Leclerc. And the scary thing is, it seemed like he could have gone even faster if he wanted to. Speaking of Charles Leclerc, it seems like Leclerc is probably going to be the main rival for Red Bull and Max Verstappen. However, on race 1, reliability already reared its ugly head. Reliability for the Ferrari is not good at the moment. Leclerc lost an energy store before the race itself, and it seems like he's lost another one. So it will be interesting to see if either of those are salvageable, or if Leclerc already has to take a power unit penalty. These reliability woes, along with Sainz currently struggling with balance, means that Ferrari is not in a great place at the moment. But that being said, I do think Saudi will suit the Ferrari car much better, as Ferrari are way faster in the high-speed corners, and Saudi is notorious for its high-speed corners. The question mark hanging over them though is if they can survive a full distance of the Grand Prix. During the race in Bahrain, it was clear that one of the big three teams was struggling for pace, and that was the Mercedes team. Throughout the whole weekend, it just seemed like Mercedes was the fourth fastest team. Hamilton and Russell did have an exciting battle though with the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, but both drivers lost out to Fernando Alonso and both drivers were overtaken on track. Alonso put a brilliant move on Hamilton into turn 10, which is not a normal overtaking spot, but somehow Fernando made it stick. And speaking of Fernando, Aston Martin had the perfect start to the year. There is literally only one thing that could have made it better, and that was if Lance Stroll was able to overtake Lewis Hamilton, but Stroll did beat George Russell, which I think shocked a lot of people, and he was only a couple of seconds away from beating Hamilton. And given the accident that Stroll had before testing, it was a really incredible achievement. Further down the field, we got an indication just how tight the midfield will be, as the likes of Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Williams and Alpha Tauri were all in the mix for those last couple of points. And I have a feeling those few points are going to be very important later on in the season. As for McLaren and Haas, they both had a very poor Grand Prix, but hopefully they both sorted out the issues that plagued them. For McLaren, they had woeful reliability, and it almost seems like they were just not ready for the race, given that they also had terrible reliability in testing as well. Hopefully with a couple of extra weeks, they've been able to learn a little bit more about their car and sort out those nagging issues. As for Haas, they just had no race pace. I'm not sure if it is high tyre wear, but they were nowhere in that Grand Prix. But that being said, Hülkenberg did have a good qualifying. Now, let's get to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix preview. This is the second Grand Prix of the year, and the entire pack will be praying that Red Bull will not be as dominant as they were in Bahrain. I think that there's a good chance that they will not be as strong this weekend. The Saudi Arabia circuit is a high-speed circuit with close walls, meaning that every driver is just millimeters away from a huge incident. And we have seen some massive crashes at this circuit from just the first two races that we've actually had here. Although, that being said, usually those incidents have involved Mick Schumacher. In the first race, he had a big off in the Grand Prix, which caused a red flag. And last year, Schumacher hit the wall hard in qualifying. With the tight walls, anything can happen. Due to the high-speed corners and the very tight walls surrounding the circuit, that means that overtakes are actually more tricky than in Bahrain. The upside of Bahrain is that there are a lot of heavy braking zones, which typically leads to more overtakes. However, Saudi Arabia doesn't have that many braking zones, at least heavy braking zones, because a lot of the braking zones actually lead into fast corners, so the stopping distance is just not enough for a lot of overtakes. This can be seen by the fact that last year there were 32 on-track overtakes, but we did at least get to see another great battle between Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, which was won by the Red Bull driver after some interesting tactics with the DRS zones. Speaking of DRS, Saudi Arabia, at least right now, features 3 DRS zones. One down the pit straight, one into a very fast chicane, and one into the final corner. With there being a DRS detection point between the final corner and the DRS zone on the pit straight, we can sometimes see drivers playing chicken for DRS, which coincidentally enough is what happened last year between Verstappen and Leclerc. Another reason why there are fewer overtakes in Saudi Arabia is because tyre wear is not that high due to the smooth surface. When compared to Bahrain, this can be seen by the fact that last year there were 18 pit stops, which is, well, not a lot. Pirelli will be taking the C2, C3 and C4 tyres much like they did last season, meaning that it will probably be a one-stop race once again, with the drivers using soft for qualifying and then the medium and hard compound tyres for the race itself without a lot of wear. Last year, pole position was a 128.2 and was set by Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, and the fastest lap of the race was a 131.64 by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Now, let's get to the top 3 teams, and let's start with the Mercedes. For Mercedes, Bahrain was not good. They are currently 3rd in the Constructors, but they were clearly the 4th fastest car that weekend. There are rumours going around that they are now accepting that their current design philosophy is not working, and well, based on the results, it does seem pretty clear that the benefits of the design does not outweigh the negatives. For Lewis Hamilton, he was able to outrace his teammate George Russell, and he was able to beat one of the Aston Martins. But even in doing that, he was not able to beat Carlos Sainz, who was really struggling in that Ferrari. And if Leclerc did not break down, both Hamilton and Russell would probably have been nowhere near his Ferrari. As for Russell, he was beaten by both Aston Martins that weekend, but that being said, I do believe that Saudi Arabia will be slightly better for Mercedes than Bahrain was. I do think they probably will be the 3rd fastest car this weekend, as opposed to the 4th, but that being said, right now is just a struggle for the team. They just need to gather as much data as possible and try and use that data to make the best possible decisions regarding what will essentially be a B-spec car later in the season. Next up is Aston Martin. This is a surprise because usually this segment is all about Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, but we have a new contender in Aston Martin. As mentioned earlier, Aston had the perfect race weekend in Bahrain and pretty much maximised their opportunities. However, I don't believe that Saudi will go just as well as Bahrain did, sadly for them. As brilliant as the car is on the brakes, Saudi does not have many heavy braking zones, as I mentioned earlier. And another issue is that based on the data from Bahrain, the Aston Martin is a pretty draggy car. This drag is going to hold them back at this circuit, but maybe, just maybe, they might be able to trim off a little bit more downforce than the rest of their rivals, and if they can do that, then they could be in the fight again. But I've got to say, I will be surprised if they can finish in the same way that they did in Bahrain. With this being Saudi though, chaos is always hidden around every corner. Alonso had a brilliant race in Bahrain. He was the strongest car on the brakes, and in the race, he was brilliant. The tyre wear on the Aston Martin was pretty low, and this low tyre wear meant that Alonso was able to fight. He was slower than the Mercedes in the beginning of the stints, but by the end, he was able to get past the Mercedes and get past Carlos Sainz as well. So, that being said, he could still have a brilliant performance, but there's something telling me that I don't think Aston Martin will be on the podium in Saudi Arabia. And finally, let's talk about the rocket ship on wheels, also known as the Red Bull. For Red Bull, they had an absolutely formidable car in Bahrain. In terms of tyre wear, they had less tyre wear than the cars around them, but they were able to maintain a much faster pace than those same cars. They were the only team able to run 2 softs and 1 hard compound, and overall, it was just the perfect start to the year for them. Based on last year's performance, and given how Bahrain went, I do think it's probably going to be another dominating weekend for the Red Bull team. They've got everything going their way currently, and I will be surprised if it is anything other than a 1-2 for Red Bull once again. At times, it literally felt like Max Verstappen was just cruising in the Red Bull, and he could have probably gone another half a second a lap faster. And his teammate Sergio Perez also had a good race. Perez didn't get off to the best of starts, but as the race went on, he was able to close the gap and get past Charles Leclerc. Once he got past Leclerc, he was able to maintain the same pace as Max Verstappen, which tells me that Red Bull were just maintaining the pace, which is, as I said earlier, pretty terrifying for their rivals, which is why I think it will be a big surprise if it's anything other than a Red Bull 1-2 this weekend. So with that in mind, let's get to the predictions, and let's start off with pole position. One thing we've learned from last year is that around street-type circuits, Sergio Perez has an extra gear that he just somehow manages to unlock. And even though Max was in another league in Bahrain, I am going to go for Sergio Perez to score pole position in Saudi. In terms of the midfield, I think it's going to be another very close battle between the likes of Alfa Romeo, Alpine, Williams, and hopefully McLaren as well. I'm really hoping McLaren have managed to fix some of their issues that plagued them in testing and in Bahrain. But I am going to say that the midfield team that will be on top in Saudi will be the Alfa Romeo. Now, what about the podium? Well, for third place, I am going to go for Charles Leclerc. As I mentioned previously, Ferrari have a great car in high-speed corners, and due to the nature of the circuit, I think Leclerc will be managed to get himself on the podium. In second place will be Sergio Perez, and the winner of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix will be Max Verstappen. Sadly, it is boring, I know, but I can't see Aston Martin getting another podium this weekend. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you think? Who do you think will be on pole position? And who do you think will win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix? As always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.